Welcome to Black and White, brought to you by xrepublic.tv. I'm Mark DeWitt. Today we're going to talk about some of the top stories from 2012. There's a couple of definitions I want to get in during this talk. The first one we'll talk about now is called agitprop. Now, it's political propaganda disseminated through art, literature, drama, especially communist propaganda. It's important to know because we're going to be talking about how the media views some of these stories. Our first story that we're going to review is Fast and Furious. Now, Fast and Furious has been viewed through the mainstream media in very different ways. There has been adjustments on who to blame, who's responsible, whether anybody was responsible. At this point, the one thing we know about Fast and Furious is that a bunch of guns, military-grade weapons, grenades were brought down into Mexico and were given to drug cartels. Now, the interesting thing about it for us is that we paid the taxes in order to purchase those guns in order to bring them down there. Our government armed people from another country, and some of those arms made their way back to the United States and actually killed U.S. officers. Now, the second definition that I want to go into is treason. Now, act of attempting to overthrow the government of the state one owes allegiance to, or rendering aid and comfort to betraying the state into the hands of a foreign power. Now, I'm not sure if we can go into Fast and Furious and exactly transfer that definition, but it gives you some thought, and it makes you think about things. And certainly the way the story was brought into the mainstream press gives power to the idea of agitprop. Now, the second story we're going to talk about is the NDAA. Now, the National Defense Authorization Act has gone through many stages. It was brought in supposedly to make us safer here at home. As it came through, the president was refusing to sign it. The Congress may or may not have brought it in. And at the end of 2011, it was brought into law and signed by President Obama. Now, the whole idea of this act and the information that's in this act are very, very strange, and a lot of the information hasn't been brought out so that we can actually view it completely. In fact, Congress has been denied access to some of this information. The one thing we know for sure about this is that all the pundits and all the people that have been viewing it have said that it actually has brought us back to a position where we no longer have due process rights. The president or one of his people in his administration who has the authority can name individuals who can be taken without any trial, without any due process rights. Now, the idea that somehow Obama is going to be the guy who mimics and follows the kind of design that Lincoln did is completely backwards. In fact, if Lincoln is truly credited with freeing the slaves, what we've got under the NDAA through Obama is slavery reinstated. Our second and third stories are together, Libya and Syria. Now, the Arab Spring, all those things that went on in the Middle East are old stories now. We're still working in Syria. Libya fell. The Arab Spring affected Egypt and other countries over there. As we start viewing the mainstream press, we see that some of these old enemies are now new enemies, and some of these old enemies are new allies. And it seems pretty confusing to most people that try and follow it. One thing we do know is that we're still agitating in Syria. U.S. troops are over there. We went in and aided al-Qaeda, who at one point were considered our enemies when they attacked us on 9/11. We're the ones who took over Libya, and they got air support through NATO. Through our presidential policies and our government policies, we actually funded that in our tax dollars. Now, a million things have gone on over there and all the different aspects of that. One of the side stories was how the ambassador was killed, and that got into Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's, whether she was responsible or not. One thing we know for sure is, just like George Washington said, we've got no business being in these foreign countries agitating or creating any kind of system, especially in countries that have no threat to us. And they are no threat to us. These countries don't have the military might. They are not a superpower. And for us to be over there is strictly our own decision and the decision of the people that run our country. Our next story is a fiscal cliff. Now, this was a big story back in 2012, and it was viewed many, many different ways. Monetary control and the whole system of how we're going to pay our bills and how much money we have and how we're going to have to go into a system where we cut back on what we can spend and pay more taxes. It just goes on and on. But none of these stories can be viewed and should be viewed without understanding that they all flow from the Federal Reserve. 100 years ago, the Federal Reserve Act came in. The Congress, the President, all these people that have allowed this to continue for 100 years are the ones who are responsible for this so-called fiscal cliff, for the idea that we can't pay our bills. This country is a productive country. People in this country are very productive. The people in this country do not need to pay more taxes so that we can send money around the world, and we do not need to have a foreign bank or foreign nationals from other countries come in and print our money so that they can loan it to us and we can pay it back with interest. This system is never going to work. You can call it anything in the latest turn of phrase, whether it's fiscal cliff or whether it's the mortgage bailouts or however you want to view it. Doesn't mean anything if you don't understand these things based on the actual Federal Reserve Act, which is the defining characteristic of where our economic system is. Now, the big story that came out here lately had to do with Sandy Hook. And of course, we had the Batman shooting in Aurora, Colorado. And I'm going to go ahead and add something in here. I think that these can be viewed as in terms of Fast and Furious as well, because they all had the same bottom line. When the media took a view at this and the different politicians all started weighing in on this, it was all about gun control. We can only protect children if we have gun control. We can only protect people, civilians in a movie theater if we have gun control. We can only help keep people safe by arming foreigners and giving them automatic weapons and grenades, all about gun control. Well, this is another discussion viewed in the mainstream press, once again, agitprop. And what is it? We've got a system that does not accurately define gun rights. In truth, understanding gun rights is about understanding that people who are armed are safe. People who are armed are free. In the society we live in right now, they can take an idea like the situation that happened in Sandy Hook, and they can tell us that, hey, if only those people had gun restricted and watched what they were doing with their guns, these children would have been safe. Well, the truth of it is Sandy Hook and this school were gun-free zones. This is self-defense free zones through government policy. And if we go on with that whole idea, we understand that in Chicago and New York, where the strictest gun laws exist in this country, the highest crime rates exist. And that's not by accident. It's the same everywhere. A society that is armed is a polite, friendly society. If you want the complete opposite, all you got to do is follow the politicians because they're leading you down the wrong road. And once again, the media is supporting this lie. And the last issue we want to talk about today is the Obama election. Now, President Obama got reelected. It seems like there were a lot of things that came into play. There were people that talked about the different voting areas and how there was problems in the way they collected the votes. There were stories about how people were talking about the percentages and what the vote tallies were before they were even counted. And once again, it's a typical system for our elected officials to go through every single time. Remember, we had the same system going back with Al Gore, and he should have won, and John Kerry, and he should have won. And there are a lot of people out there talking about how Romney actually won the election. Well, there's one thing we know from this and from other people, especially viewing some of the information on black box voting, some of the stories in the mainstream press even. Voting does not help us. We cannot get a decent candidate to run. We cannot have the Democratic and Republican Party support an honest, decent candidate. What we get is a guy who reads up and reads a teleprompter and tells you what you want to hear and pushes their policies. These people are wagging the dog. Nothing is more reminiscent of wagging the dog than the election process. And this whole thing about Obama with him bringing out this gun control because of the whole problem that happened in Sandy Hook and what happened down there and how he cares about kids and the whole melodrama and the soap opera that's going on around it. Well, this man has no empathy at all for children and women and innocent men that are killed by drones. And he's sending more drones than any president. And these drones are going out to hit what they consider primary targets. But these primary targets have peripheral damage. And the peripheral damage, whether you want to view it as some kind of term, is women and children. Now, this is not appropriate. This guy's posturing and trying to bring this gun law in is not appropriate. Everything is being based on lies. We are not talking about these issues in real truth. And if there was one thing that I could advise people today, if you want to eliminate this type of thing coming into your mind and allowing you to get some real insight into what's going on, turn off your television, turn off your cable and satellite programming. You are being programmed. They don't call them programs by accident. They are designed to bring you into a state of mind, to give you misinformation, and to get you to deal with things that's not appropriate in ways that are not appropriate. The truth is not brought forth in mainstream media. If you want to find mainstream media, you're going to go to a place where only lies are told. If you want to find truth, you're going to have to go to an alternative media site. And more importantly than that, you're going to have to start doing some research on your own. So in closing, I want to ask you one thing. How's your leadership doing? I know the answer to that. In my opinion, it's not doing very well. I'm going to keep up with it, and you need to keep up with it too. Until we see each other again, have a great new year.